of the state of Texas, Mr. Beto O'Rourke.
Councilwoman Quarles. When I know that this is our leadership and the future of our leadership, because her work has just begun. And she was reminding me that she is on the ballot in May, and she's running in the best possible way, and that is unopposed. And we know that DeSoto is already a better place for her service. Her ambition, not for herself, but for her community and for the people that she wants to serve. And though I've only known her for a short while, it is evident in the conversations that we've had. It is evident in the pride that she took in taking me to Top 5 Barbecue, which has one of the best brisket sandwiches that I have yet had the pleasure to enjoy. Evident in the things that she is working on for this community right now, but for having the chance to meet with the councilwoman today. I might not know that not only does DeSoto not have a mass transit system and make it a little bit harder for those who are trying to get to work or complete their education or be with their family or go see a movie or get one of those great brisket sandwiches that I just enjoyed. Not only does it require leadership and the other 6 members of the DeSoto City Council, the city manager, and the mayor to make that investment, which they are making, and they are beginning a couple of small, important first steps to make sure that we have the service that can be expanded going forward. But it was shared with me earlier today that the fact that DeSoto does not have a mass transit system is not by accident. It's by design. The fact that Arlington, Texas, not too far from where we sit right now, I don't know if someone can grab the volume on this, but speak back a little bit. Arlington, Texas, not too far from where we are right now, is the largest city in the United States of America without a mass transit system. It's not by accident, it is by design. There were some people who were not supposed to come into Arlington, Texas 50, 60, 70 years ago when these systems were being planned out. There were some people that were not supposed to come to DeSoto, Texas. Back then, DeSoto, Texas was not 80% African American. DeSoto, Texas was 80% Anglo-American. And there were some people who, because of their race or their poverty or what that represented to the majority in this city, were not supposed to come to this city. And it is up to Council Member Quarles and the constituents that she represents to make up for the errors of our past, to call out the structural inequity that exists, and to be bigger and better and bolder than that, and to make sure that we have leadership that looks like the community that it serves. So, Councilmember Quarles, we are proud of you, grateful that you would introduce us and spend the day with us, to the great team that calls themselves DFW for Beto. And I just want to make real clear, it is Beto for DFW, okay? In case anyone gets the wrong impression. Swati and Moaz and Dwight and a whole team that works for nothing. Don't get paid a dime. Works for the future of this community, of this state, and this country. Every event that you have helped us to set up, that you've invited folks to, that you've organized. This is not central planning out of the Beto for Texas campaign. These are people from the community, of the community, doing something for the community. If it was the 2,000 people who greeted us in Garland, Texas, or the 1,000 people who came out in Roanoke, or the amazing turnout today in the middle of the day on a Thursday in DeSoto, you all are making it happen, and I'm so grateful to you for this work. So Moaz, Dwight, Swati, wherever you are right now, thank you for doing this. And thank you all. Thank you all for taking some time out of your day and being part of the conversation. Is this Councilmember North? Yes, thank you for being here as well. The other elected officials, too many for me to recognize and name, but I want to thank you for your service and what you're helping to make happen for this community and for our state and our country right now. Let me tell you this. A good friend of mine just sent me a clip that you have probably already seen. It is a young woman. In fact, she's a girl. She's 11 years old, named Naomi Wadler. I don't know if you all saw this. And one of these great March for Our Lives events. Amy and I and our 11-year-old Ulysses and his sister who's 9, Molly, and their brother Henry who's 7, marched with more than 1,000 of our fellow El Pasoans this weekend to make sure that this country, while it still has the chance to do so, does the right thing. And we were following the lead of young people who had organized the march and the event and the speakers and were the energy and the leadership behind this. Kids from El Paso High School and Montwood High School and Coronado High School and Chapin High School and all the high schools of El Paso were there. And we were following their lead. And somebody just sent me the speech from this 11-year-old, Naomi Wadler, who reminds us that as tragic as the events in Parkland, Florida were and continue to be for the families and the students that survived and are still trying to get over the tragedy that they experienced. For all the headlines that are grabbed by the mass shootings that take place all too often in our schools, in our churches, at concerts, in the places that we gather publicly, just like this one. Every single day, so many children are dying who don't even make the headlines in the newspapers, who aren't the lead item on the nightly news. It has become so numbingly familiar that it has failed to engage our conscience and to ensure that we act. I've been in Congress for 5 years so far, and we have had 0 debates and discussions on gun violence and gun safety. The Centers for Disease Control is prohibited by law from studying gun violence as though we are afraid of what that study might show us, of what the facts might compel us to do. Imagine the Surgeon General 40 years ago being prevented from studying tobacco and its connection to lung cancer and the hundreds of thousands of Americans who are dying as a consequence. That's exactly what we're doing in this country. More than 30,000 of our fellow Americans every single year will lose their lives due to gun violence. This happens in no other country on the planet. And so either there is something uniquely evil and wrong and bad about us as Americans, or there is an opportunity that we have before us to make policy and follow the leadership, even if it is, and maybe especially if it is, provided by an 11-year-old girl, or high school students, or young people who are not going to accept prayers and thoughts as an answer to the lives that are being lost in our country. It's going to happen. And those young people are going to force it to happen. And I could not be more proud or more grateful or more encouraged about the future of our country. When I listen to Naomi, I feel that things are going to be okay. But I'm not going to count on it, right? And that's what brought all of us out here today. These things will not get better on their own. They're going to take Naomi's kind of courage and leadership and putting yourself out there even when, and maybe especially if, it is uncomfortable. Having these conversations with our neighbors and our friends and our family members. I say this as the son of a Republican mother who we have convinced to vote for us in this election. I'll have you know. But listening and sharing and having that courage and the faith in ourselves and one another is the only way that we're going to get the kind of change that we need and that we deserve. And let me tell you about another young person, a point of local El Paso pride for me to be able to share this story with you today, though it takes place more than a half century ago in 1954 in El Paso, Texas. A young woman named Thelma White is graduating from the all-black Douglas High School in El Paso, because that is the only high school in El Paso that she was allowed to attend. And she had the courage and the confidence, which is remarkable for someone 18 years old, to go to Texas Western College and apply for admission to the only institution of higher learning in our community, probably the only institution of higher learning within 200 miles in any direction. And solely based on the color of her skin, her race, she was denied entry to Texas Western College. But of course, she didn't give up. She worked with family and friends and neighbors and fellow El Pasoans and put together the resources to hire an attorney, a young man named Thurgood Marshall, who would take her case to the federal bench in Texas. And the judge who heard that case also happened to be from El Paso, Judge Ari Thompson. And because of Thelma's courage and the advocacy of Thurgood Marshall and the power and force of their argument and the justice behind it, Ari Thompson did not just rule in a way that allowed Thelma White to attend Texas Western College. He struck down the notion that any publicly funded institution of higher learning in the state of Texas could reject anyone based on their race or their country of national origin. And in addition, he struck down the segregation clause in the Texas state constitution. The segregation clause that had persisted for generations and had ensured that there was structural inequity in the state of Texas, that people were not treated the same, didn't have the same opportunities, could never even hope to have the same start in life. And I think about her right now, because the success that she had and the changes that she helped to force for Texans, that many Texans today are enjoying, unaware of the work and the courage that went into that. We should remind ourselves that that work is far from complete. There is so much more for us to do. And yes, it's mass transit systems in places like DeSoto, in Arlington. It's acknowledging that we have the largest prison population on the face of the planet here in the world's greatest democracy. And that prison population is disproportionately black and people of color. 53% of those serving behind bars are African American today. African Americans do not comprise 53% of the population of the United States of America. A war on drugs. Yeah. A war on drugs has become a war on people. And though white Americans and black Americans use illegal drugs in the same degree, at the same levels, at the same rate, it is not white Americans, by and large, who are serving that time behind bars. And I just met somebody who had previously worked in the district attorney's office and talked about a plea agreement on which he worked that resulted in a young man from this community spending 45 years behind bars for a marijuana nonviolent drug offense.
45 years?
Yep. That's what they do. Yep.
Imagine what that person could be doing on the other side of those bars. The job that he could hold, the business that he could create, the novel that he might otherwise write, the family he would raise, the quality of life that he would improve for everyone here in this room, and by extension, this community, this state, and this country. There is so much left for us to do, and it won't happen unless we call it out. It will not happen unless we have the courage of our convictions and are willing to follow the leaders, no matter how young, no matter how old, no matter how black, no matter how white, who are willing to do the work and bring people together despite the small differences that would otherwise separate us, whether those are race or gender or orientation or geography or country of origin or anything else. None of that stuff matters right now. What matters is all of us getting together, getting after it, and helping this country right now do the right thing at the moment that she needs us the most. We are either going to be a country of walls, 2,000 miles long, 30 feet high, $30 billion to the treasury, We are either going to be a country that says all people of one religion will be banned from the shores of this country, which is comprised of those from the world over, the immigrants, the refugees, the asylum seekers who have made us the strongest, the most powerful, the wealthiest country the world has ever known. We are either going to be a country that describes the press as the enemy of the people instead of the best defense against tyranny, or we are going to be the country that decides we are going to leave that paranoia, that fear, that anxiety, that hatred, and that bigotry behind and get after the big aspirational work before us, making sure that everyone who needs to see a doctor or a therapist or get life-saving medication is able to do that. And not as a function of luck or circumstance or privilege, but something that is guaranteed that they can depend on, because again, the benefit is not just for that person who receives health care, it is for all of us, given what that person is now able to do in their lives. And I say this in a state that now leads the developed world in the rate of maternal mortality. A state that where if you are an African American woman, you are 3 times more likely to die than you are if you are a white woman in this state. And when I was talking to the leaders in Arlington, Texas and DeSoto, Texas, they tell me, listen, going to a community health clinic or a family planning clinic, if one even exists in your part of the state anymore, now that we've closed down a quarter of them, to get a cervical cancer screening or family planning help, or just to see a provider who will make the life or death difference for you or someone in your family is really hard to do when you can't catch a bus, because there is no bus here. When you don't have paid family leave, so you can take some time away from your minimum wage jobs that you work to put food on the table, a roof over your kid's head, and give them a chance and investment in their future. We are the least insured state in the country, and there are some very mortal consequences distributed unevenly in this state because of that. So we have to be the ones. Texas, they won't see it coming from us, that leads this country in doing the right thing for everybody, regardless of who they are or where they are. We got to make sure every child in this community has the chance to go to a world-class public school, regardless of what side of the tracks you live on. You are owed a teacher in that classroom who's going to give everything she or he can to your kids to spark that lifelong love of learning that is not going to stop them in whatever it is that they are supposed to do in their lives. And as some have reminded me in meetings that we've had along the way, it's a lot more helpful if those teachers look like the kids and the community in which they are teaching, that those teachers are also paid a living wage, and the classrooms in which they work. The classrooms in which they work have the resources to make sure that the kids are focused on the education, not the lack of air conditioning, not the fact that there are 40 other kids in that classroom at the same time. We talk about giving every young person in this state a chance. It begins with great public schools, great public school teachers, the nurses, the therapists, the administrators, the principals that make it happen. And when we have an administration and a junior senator that wants to take your hard-earned tax dollars, turn them into vouchers, send them to private schools away from those public school classrooms, you understand the challenge that we have right now and the leadership that is demanded from us to answer to it. I just saw a good friend of mine named Ken, who served this country, as so many of you have, and I see some of the caps and the hats, the veterans in this room who put their lives on the line for this country, who did everything that we asked of them. You and I need to make sure that we hold up our end of the bargain to them, that we make sure that every VA has the staffing, the resources, the clinicians to see those veterans and get them back on their feet at a time. That 20 veterans a day, every single day, will take their lives, 14 of those 20 unable or unwilling to go in to a VA. In El Paso, Texas, the city I represent, when I was running for Congress the first time in 2012, I was knocking on doors, learned that we had the worst access to mental health care for veterans in the country. Of 141 VA mental health care centers, we ranked 141st. So I volunteered myself to be the chief recruiter at the El Paso VA. And if you were a psychologist or psychiatrist practicing in some other part of the country, watch out, because I was going to get your cell phone number and talk you into moving to El Paso. And share with you that we are not a war zone. We're nothing to be afraid of. I'm raising my family there. In fact, we happen to be the safest city in America because we are a city of immigrants, because we are a city that's connected to the country of Mexico, and because we are a city that is home to tens of thousands of veterans who have honorably served their country. So let's turn around and make sure we hold up our end of the bargain. We've been able to turn around access at the El Paso way from 68 full-time mental health care providers to today 112, no longer last in the nation, moving up. And we're not going to be happy until we're number one. But here's something that I learned serving in Congress on the House Veterans Affairs Committee. This is not just a problem in El Paso. This is a problem across the country. And there are certain veterans, including those who have what are known as bad paper discharges, who before today could not get into the VA at all. Imagine this. You served in Korea, in Vietnam, in the Persian Gulf, in Afghanistan, diagnosed with post-traumatic stress disorder, or traumatic brain injury, or military sexual trauma, or whatever the signature wounds and conditions of service and combat are, and are unable to get the care that you need, and I would argue that you earned by putting your life on the line. That was US law until last week, because a year ago, almost to the day, March 22nd, 2017, we write a bill called the Honor Our Commitment Act that will open up mental health care to those veterans who have an other than honorable discharge. Listen, the quality of your discharge should have some bearing on what you're able to get going forward. There should be some consequences, in other words, for your behavior and your actions, but those consequences should not include your life, because those veterans who have an other than honorable discharge were taking their lives at twice the rate of the general veterans population. So we wrote a bill, and then we compromised on the bill. It's a dirty word in Washington. But to be able to get a Republican to join us on the bill in an institution whose majority are Republicans. We were able to get it passed in December, but the way our democracy works, it's not enough to get it passed in the House. You got to get it passed in the Senate, and you got to get the president to sign it into law. So we worked the phones, the personal conversations, called the senators we knew, called the senators we had not yet met, made the case for why making this additional investment in veterans is going to pay off. And I'm proud to tell you, 1 year to the day, March 22nd, 2018, this passed both houses of Congress and was signed into law by our president. We're now going to be saving lives that we were otherwise losing in this country. And I tell you that story because you're going to ask, Beto, when we're talking about healthcare and guaranteeing that everyone has it, when we're talking about equity in public education, we're talking about jobs and ensuring everyone is able to find work and have the training and the skills and the education that allow them to command more than a living wage and live with function and dignity and purpose in their lives. That all sounds great. How are you going to get that done? And the only way we get anything of any significance done in this country is to find those who may not see things the same way that we do, who may have a different perspective, but with whom we begin with the premise that they love this country every bit as much as we do. They're just as American, just as Texan, just as human as any of us. And there's got to be a way to find some common ground and some consensus and get the work done. And we may have to decide that we will not allow the perfect to become the enemy of the good. But if we can make things better, it is incumbent upon us to do so. And so I want to tell you, on any of the things that we are going to talk about today, I will give you everything I've got, which includes more than just the talking points and the rhetoric and the speeches. It includes getting down to work with people who do not necessarily agree with us, who may be of a different party, who may see things a different way. You've got my commitment to be with, listen to, and work with every single Texan, all 28 million of us, regardless of where we are here in Dallas County tonight, in Tarrant County a couple of weeks ago, in King County a few months back, which is not the most Republican county in West Texas or even the state of Texas. It's the most Republican county in the United States of America. They voted for Donald Trump 96.5% in King County in 2016, but that's exactly where I wanted to be the day that I showed up in King County to listen to my fellow Texans, my fellow Americans, to let them know I could care less if you vote for me in this election. I just want to know what's important to you so that we are in a position of public trust and power. We can do something to serve you. We're going to Lufkin and Nacogdoches and Pearland. We're going to Longview and Texarkana. We're going to Pecos. We're going to Pampa, where Woody Guthrie bought his first guitar and began to write some of the American masterpieces that so distinguished the state. Corpus Christi, and went on this beautiful sunrise run along the coast, stopped to pay homage to Selena at her statue, continued along the way, and in the process met some really amazing people. And that's the story everywhere we go. You give a Texan a chance to do the right thing, and she will each and every single time, I guarantee it. And it's up to us, with open hearts, open minds, open ears, open eyes, to work with and listen to our fellow Texans and talk about why we have the opportunity this year, 2018, to do something great for the people of this state. Wonderful, wonderful for the people of the United States of America. And to lead on these issues that we care about and in so many cases know better than anyone else. I'll close with this. I mentioned that I live and am raising my children and represent the community of El Paso, Texas, how it is one half of the largest binational community in the hemisphere, perhaps in the world. 3 million from 2 countries speaking 2 languages that come together in this one place and make something absolutely magic happen. That's not just the story of El Paso, that is the story of Texas. We are the most diverse state in the Union. We are the destination of choice for the people of the world from every single continent. We should be leading on immigration, stopping walls and replacing with immigration laws that reflect our values, written in our own image, look like us, and are there to make sure that we can lead this country in the right direction in this critical year on the issue that we know better than anyone else. So thank you for being part of this today. Thank you for allowing me to be here in your community. I'm looking forward to what's on your mind. I want a chance to listen to you, get your comments, your suggestions, your constructive criticism. Make it as critical as you want, but also provide a solution and the question. I want to hear it. Last thing that I'll tell you, if you are not part of this campaign and want to join, want to knock on doors, want to buy one of these great Beto for Texas t-shirts that you see people wearing, want to make phone calls, want to make a $5 donation. Those $5 add up. We've outraised Ted Cruz by hundreds of thousands of dollars so far. We're now past the corporations and special interests. If you want to be part of that, you can text my first name, Beto, B-E-T-O, to 90975. Beto to 90975. We will sign you up because you're like me, you don't want to be on the other side of this election, which takes place November 6th. You don't want to be waking up November 7th wondering, was there something else that I could have done? Another door that I could have knocked on, another phone call I could have made, another person I could have talked to, and more importantly, listened to. I want you to join this effort comprised of tens of thousands of your fellow Texans who are getting after it right now in doing this. But in the interest of time and my being a better candidate going forward, I'm going to listen to you. Cynthia Cano, if you raise your hand, we'll identify you, and we'll just ask you to stand if you can, and ask your question, offer your suggestion, and we'll begin a conversation in the community. So, Cynthia? Yes, ma'am.
Hi, Beto. My name is Bobby Pavon. I'm actually not a native to Texas, but I have been here 30 years. I did take the time to go to your website. And I'm going to tell you, I was a little bit disappointed. Because what I see is a lot of things being, for lack of a better word, I'm going to say whitewashed down. Now, I've been here long enough to know, we're going to be Ted Cruz. You have to get the base of this party out. The base of this party has got to come out in droves in order to offset, what's going to happen to offset those who are disgusted with the three-wing circus that we have in Washington. I got to hear something else about what are you going to do that's going to directly address the African American community. We got to basically have a Doug Jones, door-to-door, street-to-street campaign. You cannot whitewash everything. You know what happened in Sacramento is a tragedy. But the same thing just happened here in Fort Worth with a young man just waiting at the hospital for his mother to pick him up. And we can't ignore that. You have got to be in the forefront of this because black people right now, we need a reason to come out and vote. We like so many people, we're tired. And we're tired of being used by the Democratic Party too. That they only show up when it's time for us to vote for them. We had enough. We can't do much worse than what we have now. I think my dog could run Washington better than this being run right now. It's very all perfect imagination. But you have got to get, and you've got to address these issues head on. You can't, they can't be whitewashed. That's the only way we're going to get them out. And I mean, we need to pay attention to what happened in Alabama. That was black women that made the difference in Alabama. What I see, it's not going to happen. You can see it in a community that's primarily black. Look at who's in this audience. That's a problem. Okay, so I'm not here to do whatever. You know, I just tell you, because I'm a responsible person, I vote. But I'm not who you act. You act to the people who don't feel that voting for you is going to make a difference in their lives. They got to feel that voting for you is going to make a difference in their lives.
Bobby, I needed to hear everything that you just had to say. And I know there were some folks in the back who said that they couldn't hear. Bobby began by saying that she did some research before she came out today and did not feel like the things that she found online on her website reflected the priorities of everyone in Texas. And she used the word whitewash. It feels like perhaps inadvertently, unintentionally, we whitewashed away some of the big, most significant challenges and perhaps also opportunities that we have in Texas. Bobby pointed out that this room today, as beautiful as everyone is, does not look enough like the community in which it is held. And she says that is a problem. And Bobby, I agree with you. I'm going to ask for your help as well.
I did write you a letter. I want you to know.
Great.
I wrote a letter to you and your campaign manager, and I went down every bullet point you have. I went down every one of the addresses.
Thank you. And so Bobby has agreed also to be part of the solution. I mean, she's constructively criticizing what we could do better in this campaign. And again, I want to begin with thank you. I need to hear that, and I'm glad that you stood up and spoke. I'm also glad that you wrote us a letter and gave us some suggestions on what we can do, what we can talk about, and where we are. I mean, I want to remind you that I'm here, and I'm willing to follow your lead if you're willing to guide me. And I'm not just waiting for people to come out to the town hall that I'm in. It's why I spent some time today with Councilmember Quarles, going to parts of the district that she's proud of to meet people that she wants me to see. Introducing myself to everyone. I don't ask, are you a Republican, a Democrat, or even if you're a voter. I just want to know that you're here and that I have a chance to learn from you. Spending some time with Pastor King today and learning some of the history of DeSoto that I shared at the outset of this meeting, because I want you to know I understand some of the structural barriers, the way that this is baked into the system that helps to explain some of the otherwise confounding results. We just learned about recently a study that looked at young white boys and young black boys born into wealth. Parents have the same income, born on the same block, and chances are that white boy will be a wealthy white man. Chances are that black boy will be a poor black man. Why is that?
Or dead.
Or dead. Or behind bars. Well, some of the things we talked about at the outset of this meeting, this criminal justice system does not comport to the words that are written above the steps in the Supreme Court. Equal justice for all. It's great. It's an aspiration. I want to get there. We're nowhere close. In a state that ranks 49th out of 50 in voter participation. Anyone who tells you we're a red state, you tell them we're a non-voting state. And just like you don't have a transit system in DeSoto or Arlington, That non-voting statistic is not by accident, it is by design. Last year, the courts 4 times found that our fellow Texans were drawn out of their congressional districts, I would argue their democracy, solely based on their race or their country of national origin. We have voter IDs, we have voter ID laws today that are so blatantly racist, the courts have said so. And they've had the desired effect of keeping people away from the polls. You cannot use your student ID from Paul Quinn College or Texas Southern University to prove who you are at the ballot box, but you can use your permit for concealed carry of a weapon to prove who you are at a ballot box. What does that say about who we want to vote and what our priorities are and who has a voice in our democracy in the state of Texas today? So I'm gonna need your help, Bobby, I really am. And to understand the issues better than I do already, to meet those who, I agree with you, are going to decide the outcome of this election. And the talk is cheap. And so if you're willing to share your contact information with Cynthia, we will call you. And next time we are in Dallas County, you tell us where to be, introduce us to the people that you want me to listen to. And I will not ask a soul for their votes. I'll ask them what's on their mind and what their expectations are of me and what it is we have to deliver if we are to be successful representing everyone in the state of Texas in the United States Senate. So thank you for being here, for what you had to say. Really grateful.
I'm Connie, I'm from Dallas, and I wanted to thank you for running.
I'm going to repeat the question because I know not everyone can hear this.
Anyway, there was a little baby, a really cute little baby up here for most of the activities today.
I brought her because her grandparents, much to my disgust on both sides, are Republican. And when you're running for president, she will be ready to vote.
And my feeling is we owe her and African American babies, such as Latino babies, Asian American babies, a better future. And for those of us who remember Bobby Kennedy in a way, I think we have someone here today who reminds a lot of us of Bobby Kennedy. He was a lawyer. And both of those men gave this country hope, and that's something this country has not had in a very long time.
It's like looking at John F. Kennedy and Nixon, you and Cruz.
We owe children a safe place to go to school, education, insurance. We owe female children the right to make choices. And we don't need them to have ET stories 50 years from now. So thank you for doing this. And if all of us get off our butts and not only vote, but become involved and help carry the state to make it blue, we can get a lot accomplished. So thank you for doing this.
Thank you. Thanks for what you had to say. Listen, I can't repeat everything, but one of the names, one of the heroes that you mentioned is my hero also, John Lewis, with whom I serve. And it's just amazing that I get to say that. Because we talked about the courageous students who are leading right now. We talked about Thelma White in El Paso, who helped to desegregate the state of Texas insofar as it is desegregated. But we think about people like John Lewis crossing the Edmund Pettus Bridge in Selma, Alabama, and literally suffering the blows and bleeding to ensure that more people could be treated more equally, not equal, but more equally, because we're not there yet, under the law. And it was John Lewis whose lead I followed a couple of years back when we were not having the conversation on gun violence. And he said, let's get into some good trouble. And so we went down to the well of the House of Representatives to speak about the lives that we were losing in our communities, both the lives that make the headlines and the lives that are forgotten within hours of being lost by the larger consciousness of this country, certainly not by their family, their friends, and their neighbors. And for 24 hours, we held the floor of the House of Representatives, and the Speaker turned off the C-SPAN cameras because he didn't want the nation, just like they turned off the Centers for Disease Control from studying gun violence, they didn't want the nation to know what it was that we were talking about. The change that we wanted to see, allowing CDC to study gun violence, having universal background checks, which, by the way, have reduced gun violence against intimate partners in those states that have adopted them by 50%, fewer girlfriends and boyfriends being killed by a loved one, have reduced gun violence against law enforcement, fewer police officers and sheriff's deputies being killed by those they are sworn to serve and protect. Universal background checks save lives. And then this is what I learned from listening to Vietnam veterans. They tell me, I too carried an AR-15. And I carried it in the jungles of Vietnam because it was designed and sold to the US government for one purpose and one purpose alone: to kill people as effectively and efficiently and as great a number as possible. That's exactly what it does. Nothing else. Don't delude yourself. And so there is no reason that we should be selling this to the people in America and not expecting it to be used in our churches and schools and concerts and streets. And following the leadership of John Lewis and the people who are willing to get in that good kind of trouble, allowed me, someone born and raised in Texas, a state that is incredibly proud of the tradition of gun ownership and gun safety, to be an original co-sponsor this year on the assault weapons ban. So thank you for pointing out some of these heroes that we have and the leadership that they can show us right now. Yes, ma'am.
Good afternoon.
Afternoon.
I have one question. I need to know, or I would like to know, how are your feelings and what is your opinion about privatizing the VA?
The question is, how do I feel about privatizing the VA? We absolutely must not privatize the VA. If we're going to fulfill that commitment that I described at the outset of this meeting to every service member who's ever put their life on the line for this country, to every surviving family member who lost a service member in action, then we need to have a fully funded VA that also is accountable to those whom they serve, veterans and the families of veterans. And I'll tell you the challenge that we have, not just this effort to privatize the VA, just like we're trying to privatize our public schools, and that's exactly what this administration wants to do. In Congress for 5 years, you know how many VA secretaries I've worked with in those 5 years? 5 VA secretaries. Eric Shinseki, Sloan Gibson, Robert McDonald, David Shulkin, who was just fired yesterday, and now the president is about to nominate his personal physician to the second largest department in the United States government. Without that consistency and continuity of leadership, how can we hope to be able to deliver on the promise that we made to those who've borne the battle and their families? And so let's remember this. When we talk about the VA, we're talking about veterans, and not just veterans who are served there, veterans who are serving there. Almost half of those who work at many of the VAs that I've been to are veterans themselves. So you have my commitment to make sure that we fully fund and also oversee so that they deliver a VA that will serve every veteran who served this country. So thank you for the question. Hi there.
Hi, my name is Kim. I used to be a resident here in DeSoto, and I've been waiting for you to show up. But my mind, and when I think of Beto, I can only think of one word, and that is safe. We need you to at all costs. My concern is, as person of color, as someone almost 60 years old, that the Democratic Party has changed so much that I can't recognize it anymore. We used to be a party where we didn't have to agree on everything, and we could still get things done. There were people in the party that were for abortion and not for abortion.
First of all, I want you to know that I want you on this team and in this campaign, and I want to earn your vote. And I don't expect it, and I can't take it for granted. And I couldn't agree more with the premise of your question, that it's got to be all of us, and not just Democrats. I'd add there are a lot of independents and even some Republicans who have incredibly cute grandchildren that were just here a second ago, who we need to be listening to if we have any hope of representing them or earning their vote to get into a position of public trust to represent them in the first place. When with the cotton growers in Lubbock, Texas, I don't ask them if they're Republicans or Democrats. There's a good chance that they're Republicans, but I'm learning about farming issues and what it's like to grow up in Lubbock, Texas, and how hard it is to attract young people back to that community who are connected to job growths and the economy that they desperately want to grow. When I'm in a homeless camp in that same city, I'm learning that 70% of those who are there because they have a medical connection to their homelessness. And though they're in a different part of the state that is more red than it is blue, they care about the same things that all of us in this room do, no matter how blue or Democrat or independent we might be. And when I'm talking to my Republican, very Catholic, very conservative mom about the issue that you just raised, choice, pro-life, abortion, I share with her the fact that I shared with you earlier about leading the country and the developed world in the rate of maternal mortality. She can agree with me that that's unacceptable. I tell her that in the time that we've closed down so many family planning clinics, and not a dime of your federal taxpayer dollars can be used in any of those family planning clinics to perform an abortion. I want everyone to know that. But as we have shut them down, we have made it so hard for people to get family planning help that we've seen a spike in unplanned pregnancies, a spike in abortions performed. You don't want that. I don't want that. We now lead the country in the rate of repeat teen pregnancy. On those 3 points, my mom agrees that this is unacceptable. That's enough common ground for me to be able to begin a conversation with her, and we may not come to the same conclusion in that conversation, but as you just said, I'm not going to turn my back to her just because she doesn't see things exactly the same way that I do. Democrats used to win statewide in Texas because Democrats used to show up and listen to people statewide in Texas. When I was in Texarkana the other day, geographically, you could not be further from El Paso and still be in the same state. But as I began my introduction and was telling these folks where I had grown up and what it felt like to be in a part of the state that no one ever showed up, no one ever came out and said, hey, Beto, what's on your mind? How do you feel about the U.S.-Mexico border? You live here. Where are the resources that you need so that you and your community can be at your best? Before I can finish what I'm saying, someone stands up in the crowd and they said, you are talking about us. That's how we feel here in Texarkana. No one ever comes out here and asks us what's on our mind, listens to us, wants to work with us to make things better. And again, I could care less if they're Democrats or Republicans or even if they're going to vote. What's exciting to me is that they have turned out in the first place and are making this commitment to do something better. That is enough for me. I'm going to find a way to work together. And by the way, I think that's the only way that we're going to win, is to make sure that everyone is invited and that we give everyone, to your point, a reason to come out and to vote. I'm not going to ask anyone to help me do anything about turning out anyone to vote right now. How could I, if you haven't had a chance to hear me? How could I, if I haven't had a chance to listen to you? I've got to give you a reason to vote. And then you, on your own, following Bobby's lead, are going to talk to the people in this community about what this election is about what you shared with me. You're going to invite me to show up to your neighborhood and listen to the people in your life. And we're going to make their fight our fight. The issues that are most important to them, most important to us. It'll be reflected in how we campaign and how we serve. So, Bobby, I want you to be a part of this. I want Bobby to be a part of this. I want everyone in this room, everyone in this state to be a part of this. And where we are failing, where we are not achieving to your expectations, let me know. And I promise you I'll do everything within my power to live up to them. And so I thank you for being here and for what you had to say. Again, this is the kind of leadership that we need and that I have been waiting for in my life as well. So thank you. Grateful that you're here.
I
And so this question runs through my mind. I was a big Bernie supporter. I have a child behind right now who's struggling with type 1. He's 53 years old and facing death because of the insurance industry's greed. No, you can't get this test. No, we don't think that your life is worth these procedures. So we know something needs to change in the health industry. But what I want to know is, this is going to come up, how do you propose to handle re-employing the people? And I'm going to be positive that we're going to get single payer. So how do you propose to handle re-employing the people who would lose their jobs when we successfully remove health care from the grips of a for-profit greedy industry? Thank you.
The ability for our kids to get the calories and the nutritious calories at that they need to grow and to thrive and to learn in these classrooms is dependent on the options that their parents have in their communities. And too many parts of the country, including where I live in El Paso, Texas, including in much of DeSoto, are food deserts today. I was listening to Pastor King just now in the meeting that we had earlier today, and he talked about a food pantry that they helped start called Fed Up, that makes sure that the people in this community get access to the nutrition that they are otherwise missing. I also heard, and I know this is uncomfortable for us to talk about, Bobby, guide me if this is too much or not enough. But someone pointed out, it's hard to get sometimes the Trader Joe's of the world or the Sprouts of the world in communities like this one, because to some degree it is about their brand and where they want to be seen. Where are the Apple stores, I was asked in the last meeting. It doesn't matter where the customers are who are buying the food, and I don't want to single out any one brand or company, though I just gave you 3. But where are their shoppers? Where is the need? It's not like the income does not exist in these communities. It's not like people don't want to eat healthy food in certain cities or communities or neighborhoods in America. I mean, everyone does if you give them the chance and the choice, but the choice is missing. And so what can we do at the local level, at the DeSoto City Council level? What can we do at the U.S. Senate level to encourage the investment in every part of our community, and also make sure that we're facilitating the ability for these small family farms in Texas that produce so much of the food for this country and the world to be able to sell it as close to home as possible. That's the challenge, and I agree with you. But when we have a majority in Congress today that wants to cut the SNAP nutrition program right now, a president who zeroed out the Meals on Wheels program in his budget on which so many people depend. I'll tell you a quick story. I was in Wichita Falls in the neighborhood known as Vitaville, met a beneficiary of the Meals on Wheels program, and it just about broke my heart because she said, it is the best thing that happens to me every single day. And it's not just the food that is delivered, it's the person who brings the food to me, touches me on the shoulder. And it'll be the one time all day that another human being makes contact with me. And I mean, Cynthia and I were there, and tears welling up in our eyes as we were listening to her. And it is about so much, and you know this because you're a farmer and you grow the food, it's so much more than the nutrition and the calories. It's our connection to the earth, to one another, to this community. And we've got to make an investment in it. And yes, it's jobs and it's economic growth. And it's the quality that our kids are going to be able to expect from us, a quality that too many are unable to provide right now. So to whatever degree, through those nutrition programs at the federal level that I have fought for, through some innovative idea that you're going to come up with and bring to my attention, allow me to introduce in the Senate, you've got my commitment to making sure that we match what is grown in this state to where the need is, and make sure that we have healthier kids leading better lives. On the second issue, if we're going to have guaranteed health care, everyone can depend on the ability to see that doctor, that therapist, that provider, get that medication, afford that surgery. And if we have a Medicare for All system, which I would co-sponsor if I were in the Senate, what's going to happen to all of those who work in the insurance industry? Anyone who's honest will answer that we don't know, because this has not happened in our country. Anyone who's honest will tell you that we may not get our version of perfection in Medicare for all. We may get Medicare for everyone, and then some will still choose to have private insurance because they are wealthy enough to do it, and there will still be insurance providers who are ready to serve that market, but there just won't be as many insurance providers because most people, if we are fortunate, will be on a single payer system. So here's the honest truth that you're probably not going to hear from a lot of candidates. I don't have the perfect answer to this one. It's going to involve all of us deciding that we are going to work together. In Senator Sanders' proposal, there is a gradual process that takes place to make sure that those who work in the industry can transition, can get re-educated, go to school, enter apprenticeships, get the training that they need to compete for the jobs that they must have if they will continue to be successful in their lives. And so I want to make sure, just as we are going to be there for each and every one of us in this country, to make sure that we have access to health care, I want to be there for each and every person whose job may change or not be there going forward in this industry. But let me conclude this answer with this fact. The debate amongst economists on universal health care is whether it will save this country, in the words of one economist, a lot or an S-ton in how much we spend on health care. There's almost no debate amongst economists on the job growth that we'll see once there is guaranteed health care. People who are shackled to their jobs right now because it's the only way that they can afford health insurance, though they hate that job and is not the highest and best use of their talents, their expertise, and their experience. Those who can start businesses that will hire countless Americans and provide jobs for them, who once they're healthy enough to do so, will be able to deliver. We will create the jobs in this country that will employ those who are currently in the insurance industry, who may not be in the insurance industry going forward. Thank you for your question, for what you do. Really appreciate it. Yes. Okay.
Then we're going to go to this question.
Okay, so we're going to go to a question over here, and then you all are up next. And if you want to come forward after this question's asked, I'm going to turn the microphone over to you. Is that okay? Okay. Yes, sir.
Congressman, I'm of an age, as are a lot of us in this room, I think, where we've survived the Cold War and we've survived the Cuban Missile Crisis. And actually, I landed on the Korean DMZ 4 days before they took the Pueblo and stayed there for that. They've been through one tick of the doomsday clock after another, getting closer to midnight. At this point in time, with the elevation of John Bolton to the security position that he has, and the president, the unhinged president we now have in office, my question is, what can we do to ensure that we get to vote in November? I can't disrupt much. I'm in the gerrymandered district. I'm safe. Ms. Johnson is my congressperson. She's wonderful. She responds to emails, but we agree. And who can or who can we as voters, how can we engage to disrupt this process that we see happening before us? Is my question.
The question was asked within the context of the elevation of John Bolton to the most important national security position within the administration, someone who is an avowed warmonger, who believes in regime change, and you know how well that has worked in all of the regimes that we've changed around the world, from Guatemala and Iran in the 1950s, to Saddam Hussein in 2003, to Muammar Gaddafi under the last administration. Wherever we do this, we create a vacuum of power, and bad, not good things come in, like Al-Qaeda, like ISIS, like those that we are fighting and losing our American lives to, and the innocents whose lives we are taking inadvertently, which is just part of war, and yet being taken in the name of everyone who lives in this country. I was 18 years old when I remember listening to George H.W. Bush, my senior year in high school, announce that we were going to begin military action in the country of Iraq. I'm now 45 years old with 3 kids of my own, and we have been at war in Iraq every single year since then, 6 successive presidential administrations. When we declared war to go to war in Afghanistan in 2001, 17 years ago, it was just to get those who got us Al-Qaeda and the Taliban in Afghanistan, that declaration of war or authorization for the use of military force has metastasized to allow us to be today. It's tonight there in Syria, also in Iraq, in Somalia, in Yemen, in Libya. Those are just a half dozen of the countries in which we are currently taking the lives of others, putting American lives on the line, and too often losing them. When you have a president who is as reckless and unfit to serve as the one that we currently have in office, when you have the kind of hawks like John Bolton who are advising him, calling the tune and the shots, this does not end well. And to your point, it should only add urgency to the commitment that each one of us make to ensure that we are the 51st and deciding seat in the United States Senate, to put a check on this presidency, to be the leadership for the things that we want to achieve, including trying to resolve some of these otherwise intractable problems, not on the backs of 19 and 20 and 21-year-old service members, but on a diplomatic corps and a State Department that has been starved of resources and appointments, a willingness to negotiate with our enemies, whether they are the North Koreans or the Iranians or the Taliban, because the alternative is just to keep killing people and hoping that there will be a different outcome or a different result. But it was no less than Albert Einstein who defined that as insanity. And we would be insane to keep doing that. So we've got to win this election and get some sanity back to this country. Come on up. Would you introduce yourself to everyone, and then you're welcome to ask any question or say whatever's on your mind.
Hello, I'm Taylor, and my question is, how will you help with the STEM funding?
Thank you, Taylor. So, we got to make sure that every young person, and Taylor, you and every one of your classmates can compete with every other person around the world. And if we're not investing in science and technology and our math skills, and take it from a guy who was in remedial algebra for 3 years in high school, we're going to have a hard time making sure that we continue to be the most powerful, essential country on the planet. But who would have thought that in 2017, people would be taking to the streets of this country to march for science? Taylor, if you're like me, I thought that was settled 300 years ago during the Enlightenment. But when you have people who reject man-made climate change, who aren't following the facts, who don't allow members of Congress and the administration to make informed decisions, it's hard to ask young people to commit their lives to a pursuit of the disciplines of science and technology and engineering and math and the arts, for that matter. But unless we do, we're not going to be creating the jobs that your generation will be looking for. We won't be starting the businesses that will allow us to bring the innovations to market that are going to change the world. So let's increase STEM resources and funding. Let's make sure that we attract the best and the brightest to our schools, our universities, and let's make sure that we have a commitment to the science and the facts that underpin them. So Taylor, thank you for the question.
Hello, my name is Jimmy, and why do you vote for U.S. Senate?
Jerry, Yuri, you're asking a great question, and listen, why would any of us vote for a U.S. senator? Why would any of us run to represent Texas in the U.S. Senate? It's really because of you, and in you, I see, yeah. I thought when my wife and I made the decision to run for Senate about my kids. And so my oldest is 11. His name is Ulysses. And I knew sooner or later Ulysses was going to ask me your question. He was going to say, Dad, when you had the chance, when you and Mom knew what was going on in this country in 2017 and 2018, what did you all do? Did you hope it would get better on its own? Did you just let it run its course? Or did you stand up and get after it and go meet the people of this state and seek to represent them by listening to them and their kids and making sure that we fight for everyone and everything that will make this state and this country better, whether it means great public schools and STEM education, whether it means jobs for anyone who's willing to work and wants to be able to command a living wage to live with function and dignity, whether it means leading on immigration, whether it's any of the big things that we should be able to do. I want to make sure that the people of Texas, including you, are in the lead on these. And so that's why I'm running for Senate. And thank you guys.
Hello, my name is Chandler, and what is your purpose for running for Senate, U.S. Senate?
Do you have another question? I'll answer that question, but why don't you ask a question as well, and I'll answer them both at the same time.
What are you going to do for school security?
So both of these are good questions. Thank you both for asking them. Again, I'm going to talk about my kids. If we had political consultants, which we don't, if we had a pollster, which we don't, they might advise me against answering this question in the following way. But because I have young kids and because you just asked me this question, I feel like I owe you an honest answer. The fact that we have PTA meetings going on right now, where parents are instructed to tell their kids that when a shooter comes into their classroom, the child is supposed to create as much chaos and disruption as possible, throw books, scream, dance around, in the hopes that instead of taking 10 seconds to kill the children in that classroom, it'll take 20. And maybe in the additional 10 seconds, some children will be able to escape. The fact that my youngest, Henry, who's in first grade, just went through an active shooter drill in his classroom where they hid in the closet and the teacher instructed him, you need to be really quiet in this closet no matter what you hear. And they had somebody pounding on the door asking to be let in. And Henry was taught and instructed how not to let someone in to the classroom. It's not going to be solved by saying that we have to stop making video games or that we have to lock up crazy people on the streets, which is what some people will say. It has to be solved by making sure that everyone who owns a gun has the responsibility and accountability that comes with owning that gun and the Second Amendment right that is so important. It means that there is a background check on everyone. More than 3 million gun sales last year where no background check whatsoever was performed on the gun purchaser. When we do that, the folks who shouldn't have guns, at least more of the folks who shouldn't have guns, will not be able to buy them and use them against themselves or the people in their lives. It means that we also say that weapons that were designed for war, like these AR-15s, should be kept on the battlefields and should not be in our classrooms. And here's the other thing. And I'm listening to the teachers in the room on this one. I don't think the answer to school security is asking our teachers to carry a gun. I don't want them to have to do that. And so I'm going to use the inspiration that I got from your question to go back to Washington, D.C. and share with my colleagues, Republicans and Democrats alike, that you're not going to wait for us to get our act together in the next election. That we have to get something done right now. And that if we don't, you are going to hold us accountable. Because I will come back to this town hall in DeSoto. And I will be accountable to you. And I will have to answer your question again. And I want to have a much better one the next time, one that says, here's what we were able to do. So thanks for being here today and asking us these great questions. Thanks for asking us why we're running. I appreciate it. Thank you so much. This will be our last question.
Yes, hi. I am Shanita Cleveland, and I like the sound of Cleveland Beto one day for president and vice president.
Yes.
I would like to talk about the criminal justice system because I heard you mention that. Heard the young lady here mention about what are you going to do to make black people get out. So if we know that the first police systems were set up to catch runaway slaves, and the foundation was built for black people to be contained and for minorities to be contained, why not, I don't need a perfect answer. All I need is a straight to the point, I'm on this side or on that side regarding the death penalty. Because it makes no sense that people say, oh, well, it costs too much money, but really it costs more money to execute a person because they have a right to go through the appeal system 2 times, all the way to the Supreme Court, and it's 3 times the amount at the highest security prison system. For 40 years, it still takes 40 years to even get close to that $2.3 million that it costs to execute a person. And as opposed to, do you say let's do away with it because we already know it's set up on a faulty foundation, set up for a specific type of person or people, and do we do away with that, or do we keep it, and then if they're exonerated, they just happen to be already executed, it doesn't matter. So what do you really care? Do you care that it's already set up against minorities? So would you do away with it, or would you keep it?
I would end the death penalty.
Thank you.
Yes. I want to give you a direct answer to what you asked for. I'll make 3 brief, and I mean this brief additional points because you asked about criminal justice in general. I joined a bill written by a Republican colleague, former prosecutor, who waged the war on drugs on the front lines, from there saw how futile this was. A bill to end the federal prohibition of marijuana once and for all, because we're locking up people disproportionately of color for this. I'm on a bill that would end the private prison industrial complex in this country. It should not be a for-profit motive to be putting people behind bars. And here's one of the reasons that these meetings are so helpful to me. It was in a meeting like this in Carthage, Texas, where someone stood up and taught me about bail reform, which I didn't understand at all. And what he said is that no one should be too poor, or given the disproportionate impact of the legal system here, and who is arrested for the same crime committed, too black to be able to get out of jail. And unless we have bail reform, which we are seeing in places like Harris County, we're starting to see in Dallas County, we will not have equal protection under the law. So those are 4 areas, and I'm willing to learn more where we can be effective, where I think we can make a real difference. So thank you for being here. And I would be grateful not just to run as your vice president, if you will promise me an ambassadorship to a nice place somewhere. I'm all in. Thank you all for having us out here today. Very, very grateful. Thank you. Thank you very much. Really appreciate it.